The rain hit sideways the night I almost walked past him. He stood under a broken awning, soaked through, holding a paper bag that was falling apart in his hands. I had one umbrella, one chance, and no idea that stopping would rewrite every quiet thing I thought I wanted. If this story moves you, please subscribe, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments below today. The storm came in faster than the forecast promised. The way storms do in Madison, Wisconsin, when late October decides it is finished with kindness. I had just locked up my workshop on Atwood Avenue, where I spend my days as a stained glass restorer, repairing church windows and old transom panels for homes that have outlived 3 generations of owners. My hands smelled like solder and lemon oil. My coat smelled like rain before the rain even started. I am Theron Aldous Vance, 41 years old. Single in the steady way a person becomes single after a long relationship ends without drama, just quiet drift. My ex, Hollis, had moved to Milwaukee for a job 2 years earlier, and we had parted with respect and a shared houseplant we still texted about. I lived alone in a narrow blue rental on Spate Street, walked to work most days, and had recently decided that loneliness was not a wound but a room I had simply forgotten to decorate. That night, I was carrying a large black umbrella and a paper sack of takeout from a Vietnamese place near Schenck Atwood. The wind kept trying to flip the umbrella inside out, and I kept laughing at it because there was no one to laugh with and the alternative was cursing. I crossed at Jennifer Street, water already curling over the curb, and that was when I saw him. He was standing under the green awning of a closed tailor shop, the awning sagging in the middle where a rip had opened. Water poured through that rip onto his shoulder in a steady silver line, and he did not seem to notice. He was holding a brown paper grocery bag against his chest like it was a small animal. The bag was disintegrating. A can of soup had already rolled to his feet. I almost walked past. I want to be honest about that. I had food getting cold, a quiet apartment waiting, a podcast queued up on my phone, but something about the way he stood, not hunched against the rain, but simply inside it, like he had forgotten which direction warm was, made me stop. "Hey," I said, tilting the umbrella toward him. "You're getting soaked." He looked up, and I saw a man around my age, maybe a little younger, with dark hair plastered to his forehead and gray eyes that took a second to focus on me, as if I had interrupted a long conversation he was having with himself. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "My bag broke," he said finally. His voice was lower than I expected, with a softness around the consonants. I was trying to figure out how to carry it without losing the eggs. I looked down. The eggs, miraculously, were still in their carton, balanced on top of a loaf of bread that was now a loaf of wet bread. I crouched, picked up the soup can, and held it out to him. "Where are you headed?" He hesitated. People in Madison are friendly but not reckless, and he was clearly weighing whether a stranger with an umbrella was a kindness or a complication. I tried to look like a kindness. I'm not a tall man, just average, with a beard that has gone half silver and the kind of face people describe as gentle when they cannot think of anything more specific. "Just up on Rutledge," he said. 3 blocks. "I'm going that way," I lied, smoothly enough that I almost believed it. "Let me walk you. We'll fit under this thing if we're careful." He looked at the umbrella, then at the ruined bag, then back at me. Something gave way in his shoulders, not trust exactly, but the exhaustion of a man who has run out of better options. "Okay," he said. "Thank you. I'm Wendell." Theron," I said. "Here, give me the bread. I've got a free hand." We started walking. He was taller than me by a few inches, so the umbrella tilted naturally toward him, and I felt the cold seam of rain along my left shoulder where the canopy could not reach. It did not bother me. There was something about walking in step with him through the dark, both of us watching the same puddles, that felt unaccountably like company. "You live around here?" I asked. 6 months, he said. "I moved up from Iowa City. My mother passed in March, and I needed somewhere that wasn't every memory I had." I did not say I'm sorry, because people say that and it lands like a stone. Instead, I said, "Madison's a good city to be quiet in." He glanced at me. "That's the first useful thing anyone said to me about it." We turned on to Rutledge. The rain was easing into something less violent, more thoughtful. He pointed at a tidy duplex with a yellow porch light. That's me, upstairs. I handed him the bread. He looked at it, then at me, and I could see him trying to find a way to say something that did not feel like asking too much. Would you? He started and stopped. I have soup. The can survived. And I owe you at least a dry chair for a minute. I should have said no. I had takeout cooling in a bag, and a man I had known for 9 minutes was inviting me into his apartment. But Wendell had the kind of face that did not know how to perform politeness, and his invitation felt less like flirtation and more like a small flag raised by someone who had not raised one in a while. Soup sounds great, I said. His apartment was sparse in the way of someone still unpacking emotionally. A couch, a single armchair, a kitchen table with 2 chairs that did not match. On the wall above the table was a row of pressed botanical specimens in simple frames, each labeled in careful handwriting. I stepped closer. You do these? It's my work, he said, filling a kettle. I'm a botanical illustrator. Mostly for field guides and a couple of university presses. Sometimes private commissions. You drew these by hand? Watercolor and ink? The labels are for accuracy, habit. I looked at a sprig of bloodroot, every vein in the leaf rendered like a confession. These are beautiful. He did not answer for a moment. When I turned, he was watching me with an expression I could not name, somewhere between caution and relief. Most people say they're pretty, he said. You said beautiful? There's a difference. There is, I agreed. He made the soup. We ate at his small table while the rain returned in waves against the window. He asked about my work, and I told him about the church window in Mount Horeb I was restoring, the one with a single missing piece of cobalt that I had been hunting for 6 months. He told me about a commission from a seed library in Spring Green that wanted illustrations of every native prairie plant within 40 miles. We talked the way 2 people talk when neither expects to be heard and both are. At one point, he said, almost too quietly, I haven't had dinner with another person since August. I set down my spoon. August was a long time ago, I know. We did not say anything for a moment. Then he laughed, a startled small sound, and shook his head. I don't know why I told you that. Because I asked you to walk 3 blocks with me and you let me, I said. That's a lot for a stranger. He looked at me across the table, and I felt something shift in the room, a barometric pressure change as real as the storm outside. He did not look away. Neither did I, and in that long, quiet second, before either of us could speak, his phone began to ring on the counter. Loud and insistent, and the name on the screen, lit up bright in the dim kitchen, was a name I recognized. Asterisk the name on the screen was Hollis, not my Hollis. I told myself even as my stomach dropped the floor. Hollis is not an uncommon name. It is unusual but not rare, the kind of name that lives in 3 or 4 people you might meet in a Midwestern lifetime. I watched Wendell glance at the phone, wince, and silence it without picking up. Sorry, he said. That's complicated. You don't have to explain? No, I think I might. He sat back down, but the ease had gone out of his shoulders. He turned his spoon over in his hand, set it down, picked it up. I was seeing someone, he said. Long distance, mostly. He's in Milwaukee. We met online last winter and started something, and then my mother got sick and everything kind of, suspended. He's been patient. He's been kind, actually. But the last 2 months I've been trying to figure out how to tell him that whatever this is, it isn't fair to him. I think I knew before I moved here that it wasn't going to work. I just didn't have the energy to end it. I kept my face still. There are about 500,000 people in Milwaukee. Hollis could be any of them. Hollis could be a coincidence. Hollis could be my Hollis, who I had not asked about dating in over a year because that was the boundary we had drawn. Asterisk. What's his last name? I asked as gently as I could. Wendell looked up at me, puzzled. Peary, Hollis Peary. Why? I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Hollis Peary was not my Hollis. My Hollis had a different last name and a parrot named after a folk singer. The relief I felt was almost embarrassing in its size. No reason, I said. I know a Hollis, that's all. Different person. Wendell studied me for a moment. He was, I would learn, very good at reading faces, a skill he had developed during a childhood spent watching his father's moods. He let it go, but I saw him file it away. Anyway, he said, I'm telling you this because I don't want to start a conversation with a stranger in a kitchen and pretend I'm a simpler person than I am. I'm going to call him this week. I should have called him a month ago. That's not a small thing to do, I said. It is a small thing. I just kept making it big by avoiding it. I respected him for that. I have known people who tangle themselves in 3 relationships to avoid ending one. And Wendell, sitting across from me with rain-darkened hair and a half-eaten bowl of soup, did not seem like a man who wanted to be tangled. He seemed like a man trying, late but trying to be honest. I should go, I said. Let you have your evening. He nodded, then said quickly, Can I see you again? Just coffee, daylight, after I make the call? Yes, I said. After you make the call? I left him my number on the back of a receipt and walked home through the lessening rain. My takeout was cold by the time I got there. I ate it standing at the counter, replaying the way he had said beautiful, the way the lamplight had caught the silver in his temple, the careful labels under each pressed flower. He texted me 4 days later. The call had been hard but not cruel. Hollis Peary had said he had been waiting for it and that he hoped Wendell would be all right. They had wished each other well in the way that people do when they have not actually hurt each other, only failed to grow toward each other. Wendell asked if Saturday mornings still suited me. We met at a coffee shop on Williamson Street that I will call Finch and Mortar, because that is its name and because I want you to be able to picture the warm yellow light coming through the front window and the chalkboard menu with 3 kinds of oatmeal. He arrived 5 minutes early. I arrived 7. He was wearing a navy sweater that made his eyes look more blue than gray, and he stood up when I came in. An old-fashioned gesture that I did not realize I missed until he did it. We talked for 2 hours. About his mother, who had taught high school biology for 34 years and had pressed flowers and heavy books on her lap while she watched the evening news. About my father, who had been a sign painter in Eau Claire and had taught me that lettering was a kind of architecture. About the way grief settles into the body, in the shoulders for him, in the hands for me. About how neither of us had expected, at our age, to feel hopeful about anything. I almost didn't stop that night, I admitted. When I saw you under the awning, I thought someone else will help him. I thought, I have food getting cold. I'm glad you stopped. Me too. We started seeing each other carefully, the way 2 people see each other when they have both been bruised in ways they would rather not detail. He came to my workshop on a Tuesday and watched me cut a piece of amber glass for a clear story in a Lutheran church in Stoughton. I came to his apartment on a Thursday and watched him paint the curling edge of a milkweed leaf. His brush no bigger than an eyelash, he told me about his father, who was not cruel but was distant. A man who had loved his son the way some people love a difficult book, with respect and confusion. His father was still alive, living in a memory care unit in Cedar Rapids, and Wendell visited every 6 weeks. He did not know how much his father recognized him anymore. He thought sometimes the recognition was there, but the words were not. I told him about Hollis, my Hollis, the parrot, the houseplant, the slow drift to Milwaukee. I told him that we still texted on birthdays and that it had ended without anyone being wrong. He listened the way he listened to everything. With his full face. The first time we kissed it was a Sunday afternoon in November. In his kitchen, the light low and golden. Both of us standing at the counter trying to figure out how to make a pie crust from a recipe his mother had written on an index card. He had flour on his cheekbone. I reached up to brush it off, and my thumb stayed against his face a second longer than it needed to. And he turned his head just enough to press his mouth against my palm. I cannot describe how that felt without sounding like I am exaggerating. I will say only that I forgot for a moment that I had ever been 41 years old. I felt 20 and also 70 and also exactly the age I was, all at once. Is this okay? He said against my palm. Yes. Are you sure? Yes, he kissed me then. careful and unhurried, like a man who had thought about it for weeks and wanted to do it right. We did not make the pie. We sat on his couch instead and talked until the room went dark. And at some point, I realized I had stopped tracking time in hours and started tracking it in his breathing. Things moved slowly after that, in the best way. He met my sister Maribel, who lives in Verona and runs a small horse rescue, on a Saturday in early December, and she pulled me aside in the kitchen and said, "Theron." This one. I met his oldest friend, a woman named Yolanda, who flew in from Iowa City for a weekend and grilled me kindly over old fashions at a bar on Atwood. And I passed, I think, mostly because I admitted the things I did not know about him yet and asked her to tell me. By mid-December, we were spending most nights together, sometimes at his place, sometimes at mine. I learned that he hummed when he was concentrating, an absent-minded sound somewhere between a tune and a question. He learned that I talked in my sleep, mostly about glass, and then, 2 days before Christmas, he came home from a visit to his father in Cedar Rapids and sat down at my kitchen table without taking off his coat. His face was the color of old paper. "They're moving him," he said. "The facility is closing. They're transferring all the residents in February. The closest comparable place that takes his insurance is in Dubuque, which is there, and that's 3.5 hours from here. I can't drive that every 6 weeks. I'd have to move back. I'd have to." He looked at me, and I could see him already trying to apologize for something he had not yet done. The kettle on the stove started to whistle, and neither of us moved to take it off. I took the kettle off the stove. I poured 2 mugs of tea neither of us would drink. Then I sat down across from him and made myself say the thing I actually meant instead of the thing that would protect me. "Okay," I said. "Then we figure it out." He stared at me. "Theron, you have a workshop here. You have commissions through the spring. You have a life." "Yes," I said. "And I'm telling you that none of those things are more important than your father being 20 minutes from you, instead of 3.5 hours. So we figure it out. I'm not asking you to move." "I know. I'm telling you I'm thinking about it." He put his face in his hands. He did not cry, exactly. He just stayed there for a long moment with his palms pressed to his eyes. And when he lowered them, he looked at me like I was a window he had not. "Real eyes was open. It's only been 2 months, he said. No, that's not enough time to make a decision like this. It's enough time to start talking about it. We don't have to decide tonight." We did not decide that night. We talked instead for hours about what was possible and what was not. I had a workshop, yes, but I had a workshop because I had built one. And Iowa had churches too, and old houses too, and the kind of slow, specialized work I did could travel if I let it. He had family in Cedar Rapids and a network of botanical clients who did not care what city his return address was in. There were practical questions and there were emotional questions, and we sorted them into piles like laundry, and we agreed not to confuse them. In January, we drove down to Cedar Rapids together. I met his father, who looked at me from a chair by a window and said, "You're a friend of Wendy's," and Wendell nodded and said, "Yes, Dad, this is Theron." His father looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "You have a kind face?" And he went back to looking at the window. Wendell squeezed my hand under the table so hard I felt the bones move. We looked at neighborhoods. We did not commit. We looked at small houses with workshop space in the garage, the kind of houses that an unmarried botanical illustrator and a stained glass restorer in their early 40s could plausibly afford if they pooled what they had. We did not commit. We held the idea between us like a piece of glass, careful, watching for cracks. In February, his father was moved. Wendell drove down for the transfer and stayed a week. I drove down on the weekend in the middle and brought groceries and sat with him in the new facility's common room while his father watched a television show about cooking and occasionally turned to ask Wendell if he had remembered to feed the dog. There was no dog. There had not been a dog in 20 years. Wendell said every time, "Yes, Dad, the dog's been fed." On the drive back to Madison late, both of us tired in a way that felt almost peaceful, Wendell said, "I think I want to do it." I want to find a place near him. But I don't want to do it without you, and I don't want to ask you to do it for me. Those are both true. Asterisk, I drove for a while before answering. The highway was empty, the kind of empty that makes you feel like you are the only person awake in 3 counties. What if we did it together? I said. Not for you. With you? There's a difference. There is. Asterisk, I've been thinking about it for weeks. The workshop will follow me. I can finish my Wisconsin commissions and travel back for installations. There's a stained glass studio in Cedar Rapids that's been hiring restorers for 10 years. I called them last Tuesday. He looked at me. You called them last Tuesday? I did, Theron. I wasn't going to bring it up unless you did. I didn't want to push. He laughed, the startled small laugh I had heard the first night in his kitchen, the one I had decided weeks ago was my favorite sound on earth. You called them last Tuesday? It's just an exploratory conversation. Nothing's committed? But yes. We moved in May. We found a small craftsman bungalow in a neighborhood called Mound View on the northeast side of Cedar Rapids, with a detached garage that had good north light and a backyard that ended at a creek. I set up my workshop in the garage. He set up his studio in the spare bedroom, with a long table under the window and his mother's pressed flowers framed above it. We adopted a senior beagle from a shelter in Marion and named her Pilot, because she pointed her nose at every door she wanted to go through. His father lived another 14 months. We visited twice a week. Some weeks he knew Wendell. Some weeks he did not. One Sunday in late summer, he looked at me clearly, the way he had the first day, and said, "You're still here." I said, "Yes, sir. I'm still here." He nodded like he had confirmed something, and went back to the window after his father passed. Wendell and I drove up to Madison for a weekend to visit my sister and to walk the old neighborhood. We stopped on Jennifer Street at the corner where the tailor shop used to be. The awning was gone, replaced by a new green canvas one without rips. The shop had become a bakery. We stood across the street under a different umbrella, this one red and intact, and looked at the spot where I had first seen him. "I was thinking about my mother that night," he said. "When you walked up?" I had been standing there for almost 20 minutes. I think I was waiting to see if anyone would stop. You never told me that. I didn't want it to sound like I was testing you. I wasn't. I think I'd given up on something general, not anything specific, just on a category of thing. And then you stopped. I almost didn't. I know. You told me that the first night. I think about it a lot. How close I came to walking past. He turned to me under the red umbrella. We were both in our 40s, both grayer than we had been the year before, both, I think, better than we had been the year before, too. "You didn't walk past?" he said. "That's the part that matters." We were married the following spring in his sister's backyard in Iowa City. A small ceremony with maybe 30 people, including my Hollis from Milwaukee, who came up for the weekend with his husband and gave a toast about how the best thing he had ever done was move away from me, because it had made room for both of us to find the people we were supposed to find. Hollis Peary did not come, which was right, but he sent a kind card. Maribel cried through the whole ceremony. Yolanda gave a speech in which she described the way Wendell had called her the morning after our first coffee and said, very quietly, "I think I just met someone." We are 8 years in now. Pilot the Beagle has been replaced by a younger beagle named Compass, who has none of Pilot's dignity and all of her appetite. My workshop in the garage has expanded to take over half the basement. Wendell's botanical work has shifted toward larger commission series, including a permanent installation at a community college in Iowa City where every native wildflower in the eastern part of the state is rendered in his hand. We have a routine. We have a life. We have the kind of small, ordinary mornings that I used to think were not available to people like me. I still have the umbrella. The same black one. The fabric is a little faded now, and one of the spokes has been replaced, but it lives in the stand by our front door, and on rainy days I am the one who carries it. Wendell walks on my left, where the canopy reaches him. I walk on the right, where my shoulder gets a little wet. Neither of us has ever suggested switching. Some nights, when the rain is heavy and the wind is moving the trees outside our bedroom window, I think about the version of me who almost kept walking. I think about the takeout getting cold in the bag, the podcast queued on the phone, the quiet apartment on Spate Street. I think about how close I came to a life that would have been fine, just fine. A life with a decorated room and a closed door, and then I turn over and Wendell is there, breathing the slow, even breath of a man who has finally learned how to sleep through a storm. And I remember that the most important decision I ever made took about 4 seconds on a wet corner with a broken awning, and that I almost made the other one. I tell people when they ask that I shared an umbrella once with a stranger in the rain. That is the short version. The long version is the one you just heard, and the longest version is the one Wendell and I are still writing, slowly, in pencil, in the margins of a life that turned out, against every expectation either of us brought into that kitchen, to be the kind of life worth staying awake for. The rain still comes, we still go out in it.